Self-Aware Millennial.
Hey everybody! Welcome to another episode of the Self-Aware Millennial. I am your host, J.Mix, a multifaceted artist who loves to roller skate, as y'all probably already know by now. If you're just joining for the first time, my pronouns are she, her, but I accept they, them. A friendly reminder that we are on YouTube, so you should definitely check us out so you can see our beautiful facial expressions as we dive into some of these uncomfortable conversations that you're about to listen to. Yeah, I have an announcement for y'all before we get into the rest of this conversation that we're about to have. As y'all know, mental health is a big stickler for me, and I want to just give you an update on my mental health. So if y'all did not kind of see on like my Instagram stories, or if you're not following me, I got off of my Zoloft that I had been taking, which was very challenging for the first couple of days. Basically, in my Patreon, I explained why I got off of it, but I also plan to create a video, like actual episode with my side effects of Zoloft, which was, there's only really one reason why I really got off of it. The rest of it, it's whatever, but like, I'll talk about it later. So my current feelings, a few days ago, I was feeling very low, and it was like very roller coastery, like on a level of 1 to 10, 10 being really great, 1 being bleh. I was definitely around 2.5. So I think it was just like my body getting used to being off of it. And now I feel normal again. I feel great. Like I'm thriving. Like I'm writing music and everything. I was just like, okay, I'm good again. So sweet. In terms of self-awareness, because we're getting into the next part now. And then in terms of self-awareness for this episode, we will be coming at it from a more revolutionary approach. I guess we can put it revolutionary because, you know, we're all revolutionaries in our own way. And as y'all know, I do a lot with the People's Assembly here in the city. And before I got into the People's Assembly, I was, well, even right now, like I've just been doing this work being a museum worker, which I don't consider myself a museum worker anymore, obviously, because I'm not there anymore. But even when I was there, like my position there was so unique to the museum I was at. I worked at the National World War II Museum, and I was a Victory Bell there, and they're performers. We just travel under the name of the museum. Like we're performing, and I mean, we do have to be knowledgeable about the war, but we hear a lot about that through I say we, like I'm still a bell. I've been there. I was there for like 4 years, so it's like really hard for me to, it's really hard for me to just say. It's hard for me to put it in past tense, which is weird. Anyway, so, yeah, and I kind of talked about that in my episode with Karis, which was episode. Oh, there we go. I found it. It's episode 27. So I was right. Okay. Yeah. So episode 27, we kind of dove into our experiences as Victory Bells at our predominantly white institution at the time. And so if you want to hear more about that, you can go listen to that episode. I'm pretty sure I was also talking about the museum in like almost every single one of my episodes leading up to that point. Because then right after that, I was like, I'm done. Because I was gone at that point. I was like, done. All right. So I'm done ranting. So I want to introduce my guest. And I don't actually want to like give all the details on like who they are. So if y'all want to introduce yourselves, this is Jen and Fari. Okay, cool. Yeah, so I'll start with Jen, and then we'll start with Fari.
Hello, thank you, J.Mix. I appreciate
Welcome.
you for sharing that. Part of my mental health care was leaving the museum world. That really helped lift me up. And this is a special time because literally last year, this was Mardi Gras. I took off some time for my mental health, and then I turned my resignation in on February 28th. So this is a very special week. I'm very happy that no longer with the New Orleans Museum of Art. And I'm a collective member with Dismantle NOMA, and Fari and I and several other collective members. Shout out to everybody who's really been here helping us like gather information, put out information. I'm just a person. I'm a curator. I am an arts administrator. And I live in the city of New Orleans. And I just want to see us thrive and do well as people, but particularly as Black women. So definitely. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for having us both, J.Mix, on your podcast, and I'm so excited to meet you. And this is awesome. Thank you so much for having me. So my name is Fari. I used to live in New Orleans, which is how I know Jen. I was there for almost like 8 or 9 years, I think. So the majority of my adulthood was spent there, for whatever that's worth. I'm still a child. But I'm currently based in Oberlin, Ohio, which is a really small town. It's a college town. I'm very lucky and blessed and privileged. My mother is a college professor here at Oberlin, and so I came home. Last year around this time, I was working at the Kalamazoo Institute of Art, which is in Michigan. It's in Southwest Michigan, right between Detroit and Chicago. So best of both worlds, I think.
Yeah.
And like Jen said, I have to say that my mental health is so much better now that I am no longer working in that context. I was working in the curatorial department there, and I also am an art historian, or like a burgeoning art historian, because as I was just telling a friend of mine earlier, I got my PhD in cultural anthropology. And to go back to the commentary we were making about how exclusive the art world is and how it succeeds in making you feel like you don't have anything of value to offer, to contribute, is they say like, oh, well, you're not an art historian. You don't have your PhD in art history. And so, whatever. It's like just another gatekeeping mechanism. Yeah. But I actually teach in the art history department at the Kalamazoo College. So I am right now teaching a course on modern and contemporary African art, which I am just loving so much and learning so much with my students. It's such an amazing and incredible journey. And hopefully, I will continue to work in a curatorial capacity as well. But I'm one of the last people to join the Dismantle NOMA collective. And I'm just very grateful to be a part of that work, because we chose NOMA since all of us have worked there in some capacity at some point. But really, so much of what we're talking about is rethinking and reorganizing the institution of the museum such that it can serve the entirety of the communities that want to be a part of that institution's life,
Yeah, I do feel even. Oh, you're welcome. No, that's a great comment, because I feel like, especially with a lot of these, and I know we're primarily going to be speaking about art institutions or art museums, but I mean, this does kind of carry throughout all museums in a way where I guess the people that come in have, I don't know, like this imposter syndrome about them. I don't know if you want to call it imposter syndrome, but like not imposter syndrome. I just like the word imposter syndrome. No. People just feel like they don't belong there, or depending on who you are, they don't feel like they belong in those spaces in a way that like they feel like they're actually welcome. Like they know they're there because they are either there for a field trip or because I don't know, someone that they know like used to work, do something in that world of some sort. But like, as for them like being welcomed there to just like be there and not because, oh, I want your money. Like, I don't know if people really get that when they go to art museums, like, or any museum at all. So yeah, thank y'all for introducing yourselves. I appreciate your contribution to Dismantle NOMA for sure, because like when Dismantle NOMA came out, I was like, oh Here we go. And that was the inspiration behind Dismantle National WWII Museum. I did not start Dismantle National WWII Museum. Someone else did, but I never knew exactly who did it because they never like revealed their name. So like when they handed it over to me, I was like, you want me to run this? Okay, well, I'm gonna have to find some people to help me because like that's a lot of work. Yeah. It's work from the heart. Like you ain't getting paid for it either. So it's like, so in that regard, I understand where y'all are coming at from this, and that's why I definitely want to have y'all on this podcast, just because like I know we have so many commonalities in that regard. So if we have some time after or before we close out, I would love to just talk about like your experiences with just like finding content and like doing all like just like keeping it managed like this entire time. So I have a question for y'all before we get into our next segment. When did your dialectical lens about everything that was happening that you are now like conscious of, when did that lens start opening up, like about how your lives were being exploited within your workspace?
Man, I mean, for me, I love museums. I've always wanted to work in museums. My father was a librarian. And when I went to school for history, my parents said, okay, are you going to become a teacher? And I was like, hell no, because I don't like getting up in the morning. And that's not my personality. But how else can I share? I was like, oh, I want to work in a museum. Like literally 15 years ago, I was like, I want to work in a museum. And so when I got, there was an idea and the actual reality. Working for smaller institutions, I've worked for like culturally specific institutions like African American art museums, larger museums. I worked at the High Museum when I was in college. And then working at the New Orleans Museum of Art, I just really had a feeling early on that my contribution, the contributions of people of color were not being taken as seriously as other people. And there was a lot of pushback, and a lot of the things that we were trying to do were not being lifted up as much. And the artists that we were bringing in to do performances or to do music, they were not being paid at a level that, other scholars were being paid. And so I just felt, very much early on, like, I have to maintain my career. I can't, just walk out today. Right. But I had a lot of, I want to walk out today moments, including during our first diversity training that the institution had had in over 5 years. So I had that moment that a lot of us did. We went back to our office and we were just kind of being like, what was that? That was the day I felt like, oh, I shouldn't be here. This is not for me. But you feel that pressure, right? As a person who's a worker who needs to pay your rent, pay your light bill, Entergy, doesn't play games. I was like,
I just got my bill the other day. I said, Lord,
it's high. Okay. Entergy bills are high. So I was like, I got to figure this out. I got to come here every day. And that's when I was just feeling the pressure and the tension. I started talking to other people who were there and in other institutions in New Orleans, right? Because it's not just art institutions. It's a citywide, state, nation thing, worldwide thing.
Yeah.
And so we would happy hour, we would start talking about, stories of this and stories of that and crying and being like, oh, I can't take this anymore. And then finally, a decision was made. It was like, I can't do this anymore and I need to do something else. But I think it was collective. The thing about art museums is that it's very, not even art museums, but cultural institutions sometimes have a high turnover. And so people were dropping like flies. I mean, I was one of many people who left during a certain period of time for much more egregious reasons than the reason why I left. So I just felt like this ain't it. I should take my brain power and for the use of the people. And that's what I'm currently doing.
Yeah. You doing that. I had a question about the diversity training, because I know that's what a lot of institutions are doing right now. And I know the museum is doing it like as we speak. But I wanted to know from you, like, what about that diversity training was like, okay, what was that? to you? Like what
Us,
made it
you know, it was just like, well, first of all, it was sparked by two individuals who had heard a senior staff person make a slur against another LGBTQ staff person. So it was kind of sparked as a reaction and not an opportunity to really train your staff in like inclusion and equity. So it was, you know, it was that kind of thing. And then it also was facilitated by a docent, which in the museum world is a person that gives tours, a person who provides historic information about the collection. And so that's not an outside objective person who can really guide you through ways to really push you to think about things through a racial lens and really explore your biases. You know, they just, you know, paid somebody locally to just do it to do it. And it was clear. And then at the end, they showed us a little clip from Everybody's a Little Bit Racist, which is a play. And we all were in the auditorium and we were like, what the hell is this? And we all went back to our offices and we were like, what the fuck was that?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay, do you know the name of this company by chance?
It wasn't a company. It wasn't a company?
What? Okay.
It was an individual.
Well,
yeah.
All right, well.
And just to add a little bit more context to people who may not be familiar with like the kind of dynamic that is. So most of the time museum docents are volunteers. They are not paid. That means that in order to receive the training and to be able to facilitate tours of the different exhibitions during the daytime when most people want to take a tour, you have to either not be working or be free to, you know, do these things. So there's already a certain element of age and class and unspoken, of course, race, because most museum docents happen to be elderly, affluent, white women. So, you know, just thinking about how they not only remained inside of the museum community, but then they remained inside of this very small like demographic that really is exemplary of who they see as the museum community and who they lend authority to. So the fact that that person would be trusted to facilitate a training with no actual experience or training of their own around these very important issues around equity, around inclusion, around just basic human respect and dignity. Like whatever it is that that person was called, they have a name. Hey. So why you gotta call them anything? Right. Why you gotta call them pronouns? Why you gotta call them a slur? They have a name. They work there. They're your coworker. Like, we have to train you to be respectful to the people that you work with? Come on, stop it. Stop it. You're not serious.
Hello.
And so when you talk about like when did we become aware of this level of exploitation, I feel like I went into it and I knew that that was what was going to happen. And I'll tell you why. I don't think I told other people this before, but so I applied for this position at the museum through a third party. So I didn't actually apply to the New Orleans Museum of Art. I applied to the American Council of Learned Societies Public Fellowship. And I said, I want to work at NOMA because blah, blah, blah. That was one of the choices that I had. And I said, that's the one I picked. Mm-hmm. So, but then the museum does the interviewing. So my first interview, I go in, I'm all dressed up, you know what I'm saying? I'm a newly minted PhD. This is my like first big opportunity and it's at the New Orleans Museum of Art. Wouldn't my grandmother be proud, right? She used to bring me to the museum when I was growing up. She used to give me little presents from the gift shops on Christmas and, you know, so I'm like, okay, yeah, go ahead, girl. And I get in there and there's like 5 people in the room with me. It's the director of the museum and the senior staff. One of them looks racially ambiguous, but I had found out through research that she was of Jamaican heritage. I'm like, okay, girl. I tried to bond with her because I was like, my grandfather's from Jamaica, girl. Let's talk. She wasn't having it. She was like, I don't know you. I don't know your grandfather neither. Okay, whatever, right? So we're in the interview, and I want to say that the director of the museum was like, what do you think people want to see from the museum, or like, how can you make a contribution, or something like that? And I was like, well, you're a relatively new director, because at the time, this is like what, 2014, 2013. I was like, they want to see what new direction you're going to take the museum in. And she was like, what new direction? I mean, how many new directions can I go in? I was like, damn. Okay, girl, I'm sorry. I mean, I'm just saying, you got here, you published the catalog called Ancestors of Congo Square. You made a big hoopla around that. Just trying to see, is that going to be a one-off thing, or if that's going to be like a signal to various communities in this majority Black city that we live in, as to whether or not those folks will be welcome in this institution, not only as visitors, but also, hey girl, hey, I'm applying for a job, right? And not just as a like gallery guard, but as someone who is also actively informing the public programs, the exhibitions, and the culture of the museum, and how the people within it, interact. So from her response of like bulking, I kind of knew. And at that point, I wondered, am I not nailing this interview? Like, up until this moment, I thought I was nailing it. I mean, I had them on the, I was like telling them about my grandma. One of them was like, oh my God, that's so sweet. I was like, yes, right? And so I was kind of surprised when I went in for a second interview. I was like, okay, girl. And then I got the call that I had been offered the position. And I thought, is this to prove something? Is this to prove a point? And while I was there, the level of mentorship that I had been promised through the program at the ACLS about how I would be interacting with my colleagues at NOMA, it wasn't at all. And I found that when I wanted to create programming, when I wanted to, offer strategy, when I wanted to amend systems and structures, that I was resisted, and I was told there's no resources for that. And I was not given much to go on, and yet I still did some stuff. I still was able to like accomplish things, which I'm proud of doing. But at the same time, I felt like, okay, so it's clear that I'm the diversity hire, and people are really reacting to me as though that were the case. And so many of the people who do the program that I had done, when I first was beginning it, the orientation was like, oh yeah, 70% of you will be offered a permanent full-time position at your host institution. So isn't that great? Getting the leg up on your, in your career. And I should have known better than to even think that they would extend an opportunity for me to stay at the museum in a leadership capacity, to the point where the director came in my office months before the end of my fellowship term and said, well, what are you going to do? I'm like, well, you are supposed to be my mentor. You are supposed to be helping me figure out what I'm going to do. But I guess I'll figure it out. and I continued to live there and feel as though whenever I went back to the museum that I was persona non grata, And so that's why I was very, very happy and enthusiastic and felt obliged to participate when I was invited to Dismantle NOMA, because they were trying to take advantage of a situation of unrest, take advantage of the popular opinion that says, no, you cannot do violence to Black people wantonly and indiscriminately and with impunity, And it's like, how can we just sit there and watch this hollow ass performance when we know, because we've been on the inside of it and we've felt how they treat us. So you think those Black people over their lives matter, but what about the ones that's in your institution?
Right. Yeah.
So I'll get off my soapbox.
No, you are
thank
speaking.
You for that.
Yeah, thank you. You are speaking the language of so many of us. So I'm really thankful that you expressed that, because, man, you said it better words than I probably ever could. But I wanted to get into the next segment, which is basically, I still don't have a title for it, everybody. It's called Self-Awareness in the News for now. But it's basically a segment where, it's in the title, where we reflect on current events that help us assert our own self-awareness. In this regard, I wanted to hone into something that recently happened within the last maybe 2 weeks. That pertains to the conversation that we're having right now about museums. There was a job posting or a job listing that was posted to the Indiana Museum of Art at Newfields. It emphasized in that posting that they wanted to, quote, attract a broader and more diverse audience while maintaining the museum's traditional core white art audience. And obviously they got hell for it, clearly. Like somebody, I guess they didn't realize, someone's going to read that and find it problematic, or I don't know who wrote that. Actually, we probably know exactly who wrote that job posting, but their response and apology was that they said, our audience and most museums audiences have historically been and currently are too homogeneous, and we are committed to changing that and intentionally diversifying our audiences. We deeply regret that in our job description, in our attempt to focus on building and diversifying our core audience, our wording was divisive rather than inclusive. Our intention is to continue to build an institution that is truly inclusive. It will be our challenge for years to come to continue building our diversity, equity, and confusion. Sorry, I read that wrong. And inclusion in our hiring. Oh my God, wait, I gotta use that. I gotta write that down. Sorry. And then they said, equity and inclusion in our hiring programs, artwork, exhibitions, and more. And we are committed to doing so. So I want to hear y'all thoughts on it. Sorry. Diversity, equity, and confusion.
Child, who wants to go first? I have so many thoughts.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So many thoughts. First of all, Kelly Morgan came out last year.
Thank you. You better say her name.
And also she was a curator at the museum, and she left the museum, and she made it very explicit why she was leaving, because she felt unwelcomed, unsupported, and her brilliance she took her brilliance away, right? And everybody was like, oh, you're being sensitive. It couldn't be that bad. And then this comes out, right? And there's a firestorm. And particularly what's interesting is that the use of the word white, that was implied, even if they didn't put it in there, because of how they said their core audience. So what we have to do, we talked about earlier, was like, how do you prepare yourself? How do you prepare to even enter these spaces or not? You have to fortify. You have to really research the coded language that goes into these job descriptions. Yeah. And when they're in these panel interviews with 5, 6, 7, and 8, 9 people, and they're peppering you with these questions about how you're going to enter and prepare audiences, right? Because I worked in public programs. It's like, what are you really trying to say? What are you
Right.
really trying to put out there? Because even if they hadn't put that word in there, right? And they eventually, the president or the CEO, the gentleman resigned. But the reality is that had to go through multiple layers of eyes to be reviewed and put out. And he's only one person. So they, after an open letter went out, over 2,000 people signed it. I signed that letter as well. They were like, okay, he's going to resign, but what are you going to do next? The demands of the open letter are extensive, and it has to be, addressed in that community.
Mm-hmm.
But it does give me hope that they were able to pressure him to resign, because we want Susan to go. We have voted no confidence in her as a leader. And as someone who is a member of the New Orleans community, like, we don't want someone who's going to be there, who's going to talk down to the people of New Orleans, who's going to think that they're better than them, who's going to look at the cultural practices with disdain, like, no, we don't want that. And so I think that it's really important. Yes, that's not enough. But at the same time, like, we can't begin to heal with the knife still in our back, as Malcolm X said, right?
Yes.
Like, you put the knife in 9 inches, you take it out 6. That's not progress. No. You haven't taken the knife out my back. And you don't even acknowledge the fact that you put it there and that it's in there right now, So, you're so right, Jen. Everything that you said is so right on, because even if they never would have said their core white audience, they framed it and couched it in such a way. And it's like, oh, so you want diversity, you want to spruce up the place, you want to like paint the shutters or whatever, but that's about it. Like, what kind of stuff is that? And so, yeah, I do think at this point in my life and career, I wonder, like, I don't think I want to work in a museum space. And I can say that having worked at a museum that was led by white women, and I can say that having worked at a museum that was led by Black women, both in the, American art, field or whatever. And
do you find this? Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Do you find that the commonalities between those two have to do with just the structure of the ways in which that, because
you're the like, it doesn't matter. Overarching structure remains the same.
Is it capitalistic and it's so capitalism?
It is. And also, I think that it's about just like culturally gatekeeping. Because what museums do is that they make things palatable. They make things legible. They make things legitimate. And so if you're never questioning the position of being able to be that arbiter in the first place, if you're never questioning the audience that you're, empowering to digest and now understand and know these things, then you continue to reproduce these very harmful and damaging systems and worldviews. And that plays out in people's lives and every day in very real ways. And that's the thing that's so harmful. It's like, it would be nothing if, this is just the province of rich white people and what they like to do. And it just like stays there, but it doesn't, it bleeds out all over the place. And it rests on so much exploitation, and it knows it does. AAMD put out no more free internships, right? Well, they put that out well over a year ago. But to my knowledge, if we want to spill a little tea, because you can't kick me out of my mama's house, so I can say this with my chest, the KIA still employs, you can't employ a unpaid intern, but they still use them.
Yeah.
You know, and they're a member of the AAMD. So what are we doing here?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And everybody knows that, yes, there's turnover, but when you find a job where you can be stable and you can have what you need, you're not letting that shit go.
Right.
And so, you know, there's turnover only in the lower ranks, never in the upper. Yeah. Never in the upper.
And that brings up, at least in my situation at the World War II Museum, or I know a lot of people that have stayed despite all the allegations that have come out. A lot of them, it's they have children, they have a family, right. they need it. And like, even, and everybody knows this, my mother works there too. Even during all of this was like, I think she's now there, it's been like 2 years or whatever, but you know, one of the main, like, it's the best job she's ever had. And I don't want to give that away. And you know, my mother, who was in like her 60s, you know, like, this is the best job that she's ever had, because she's never been given the opportunity to work at a better job up until this point.
Right.
And at least for her, it's like, you know, I'm happy that she's like at least making enough to get herself by. And she's a great worker, you know, she's very much like me, you know, I guess. And, you know, very nice personality for what she does there. You know, like, they appreciate how she's making them business, you know, in a way, because like for so long in her specific department, there were people that, you know, it's kind of, you know, they use it as a passerby job, or whatever the actual word is, where you like, it's a job where you're there and then you go somewhere else. Like, she's there, like, dedicating what she has learned her entire life to basically serve and like make the museum more money, which unfortunately, it makes me cringe, because I'm like, you can make it so much more without, like, you're basically making the money. Because I think about the person who's making the most money off of the museum right now, and obviously is in the what's that thing called again? The form that you can, the nonprofit.
Is it the movie space?
No. So you know the name of the form that you can go online and see, that like for all nonprofits or whatever, you can go see like how much.
Oh, the salary.
Yeah. Yep. So thinking about it, and from that regard, knowing that my mother and everybody there is contributing to that, you know, like, just like seeing the inequities and like how much the highest person is being paid versus how much she's being paid. And yes, even though she's making, like, she's starting to get a little raise every now and then, it's still crumbs. It's still crumbs compared to the money that the museum is getting anyway. So I'm going on a tangent. So back to what I was saying, I guess in this regard, like, I understand why people stay. And I guess on my end, like, the reason why, and I think I was privileged enough to leave when I did, because I don't have a family that I have to take care of. I don't have all these other responsibilities. I'm literally taking care of myself. So if I know I can take care of myself on my own, then no one else is dependent on me. So I guess this is another good question I can ask y'all. Do you think that you will work for another, like, I know we're talking about art museums or museums in general, but like, I just see them all as predominantly white institutions. And my thoughts have definitely transformed within this last year about like how I don't want to contribute anymore to predominantly white institutions, like anymore ever, because no matter what I do, and it kind of goes back to the Newfields job posting, it's the more let's say the more I do my thing, my talents are being recognized, and it gives the museum or the institution more exposure because there's this Black woman coming in here and, you know, thriving. That gives them more money, and it makes them seem more diverse when they're not actually doing the work. They literally just, you know, hired somebody Black to make them look better and make them look more inclusive than they actually are. So I'm thinking to myself, I don't want to I don't want to be that person because I know who's still making the I'm not making the most money off of making y'all look better. I'm somebody else's, and that just doesn't sit right with me. So I forgot my question already, but I guess I'm wondering, would y'all, or do y'all think that you are in that space to ever work for another predominantly white institution ever again?
I appreciate you for one, bring like wages into the conversation and your personal relationship, your mom, I mean, who's trying to survive like everybody else. And I respect her ability to choose where she wants to work and what she wants to do. And I think that's what we're talking about, right? Like this shouldn't be like this. You should be able to work wherever you want to work and be respected and taken care of and paid a living wage or above that. And so for me, I'm so happy the question of would you work for a predominantly white institution again? Another time when I came back and I felt like, okay, this is not for me. I went to Lagos, and in the Curatorial intensive I was in, the professors or the leaders of that intensive asked, how do you fortify yourself and how do you subvert the institution so that it serves you, so that you're not being used for their purpose, but you're using them for your purpose. And so that's kind of how I look at it at this point. As a arts administrator, oftentimes I'm still in a place where I'm working with institutions of color. I'm working currently for an institution that's led by Afro-Latinx woman who is a powerhouse and is incredible. But a lot of our partners and our funders are predominantly white institutions. I also do consultation work for all types of organizations, including universities. And those we talk about, they put out performative statements last summer. And, I saw a meme that said, y'all are the thing that you're talking about. That's what you are. So how do you address that? I personally think going into contract negotiations, going into conversations with people that you may work with, you got to ask them, what's up? How are you funded? Who are you? What are your values? What are you bringing to the table? Are you paying your artists? How many artists of color are you working with? And that's really when DismantleNOMA, that's the collective brought that to me, because each of us have a different perspective. And I feel the same way. Like Fari has shared so much, you have shared so much. I think about the Take 'em Down NOLA protests and the conversations that we had, but then also like just what came out of that. And that's just that we can stand in front of these institutions and yell and be in them or out of them. But the reality is that I primarily do not want to work for predominantly white institutions anymore. I feel unsafe. I feel like sometimes they can be violent in terms of the feeling and the emotionality that you got to put into it. When NOMA said they were putting up the Greenwood Parlor plantation, I was like, what the hell is this? I felt it in my body. And I carried that with me when I was working. And they, premiered it in December of 2019. And in February 2020, I left, because that's how heavy it had become for me to be a Black woman that had to create public programs for a plantation, and not share the histories of enslaved people. I'm a historian, and my father's a librarian. I was raised in Georgia learning about the histories of enslaved people. It was the audacity for me that you would even spend your money to create this monument to white supremacy and then ask me to
the caucasity.
It was the caucasity for me. So in those instances, we gotta say, hold up, this is not what I'm gonna do. I thought I was gonna do it. No, I'm not gonna do that no more. You know? Because you can change your mind at any time.
I really second all of those thoughts and emotions. I'm really becoming much more strong and assured of my Pan-Africanism. Never more than at this moment, and part of me has always been moving in that direction just because of the way that I was raised. But also now as an adult person, it's like, all right, how do I want to make my contribution? What kind of ancestor do I want to be? And I think that it's important that we do battle wherever we stand, wherever we find ourselves, and that we're ready to like be a part of that struggle. Because wherever we find ourselves in whatever local situation, there's going to be inequality. And unfortunately, there's going to be those of us Black women who are going to be finding ourselves vulnerable to a host of all kinds of different overwhelming forces and structures and systems. And so, I think that's a really good question. And I think that I probably will work in a similar capacity. Like right now, I'm a professor at a small liberal arts college in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and they don't even have a Black Studies program. I'm the only African-American professor, or I shouldn't even say African-American. I'm the only Black professor that teaches subject matter that is specific to Black people, history, or culture. No, I'm not. There's one other. Please excuse me. I do not want to erase my good sister doing the work in the psychology department.
Oh, God.
He teaches African-American psychology, and she also does like sexuality.
I gotta take that.
I know.
But that's it. That's it. That is it. I'm teaching African-American art history. I'm teaching African art history. I'm teaching next semester film. This semester, I'm also teaching global feminisms. And when I'm gone, all those courses go with me. And I have students who have followed me further. Like I have students who I had as first years who came back to take another class and are taking another class with me next semester. Yeah. Like I have a cadre of followers now that I just feel really upset because I'm like, I have to leave you. I'm sorry. I wish I could continue to support your growth as a scholar and as a person, and in ways I can, but I won't be able to do that in the classroom anymore. Gotcha. And we can keep in touch, and I can always tell you, here, read this book, watch this film, I can always be there to listen to you and support you on your journey. But, at a certain point, it's like, it's so upsetting because it's not just an easy question about are we going to participate in predominantly white institutions when in so many ways those institutions position themselves between us and our communities. Yep. Between us and our young people, between us and our elders. Yep. It wouldn't be a problem if it weren't for that. But I have students that I taught in New Orleans that I, again, had to go through a white institution to be able to have them. Yeah. And they still keep in touch with me, and we Google, FaceTime, all that stuff. They be keeping me hip. They're like 20 years old. It's amazing. But it's really something to think about. It's really something to think about that these institutions have intervened in this way in the lives of our communities and have done so harmfully,
So in terms of Dismantle NOMA, Dismantle National WWII Museum, Dismantle all the accountability organizations that have transpired just within the last year, because I've been thinking about this a lot, especially since I've been with the People's Assembly and just like taking my political education courses, classes, and I was wondering to myself, okay, so I'm just using the World War II Museum as an example right now. I'm like, I know the efforts that we were making. A lot of us wanted the museum to be better, so that, but in the new, like, it's almost the same thing where like we want them to be better so that they attract more people or they're more inclusive, which still then makes the top person, who is usually a white man that's never really there, the most money. but what I'm trying to say, sorry, I'm like going off a tangent again. What is the purpose then of the dismantle organizations?
Mm-hmm.
Because is it there to just educate the masses, or is it actually there to dismantle the actual institution? And actually, also the definition of dismantle for anyone that is like, oh, that just must mean to destroy, you know, like, because that's what I got all the time, and I'm like, yo, there's more to it. It's not just destroying. It's with the intention to rebuild, to build up. But do we want to build it back up, or at least with those with the certain people that are in charge, you know? And it's not like they're trying to get rid of their positions, like they're comfortable there, you know? So what is the purpose of these organizations then? You know,
for me, it's, you know, the question that came up as well was, you know, can you change an institution that has the same leadership? So if you have the same director, deputy director, senior staff, that's all white.
Yeah.
Can you then call yourself an anti-racist institution, which is what the New Orleans Museum of Art is currently doing? And so I think about, just as NOMA as an example, dismantling that would look like breaking that up, breaking that down. That should be restructured. The board should be restructured. Recently, they announced that they have 7 new board members. 4 of those individuals are Black people in the city of New Orleans. That's only one step. The city of New Orleans is 60% Black and brown as of 2019, 2020. So they're wanting to implement, you know, incremental change. So dismantle to me means a radical positioning and push against the current system. So if NOMA exists in 20 years, 30 years, 100 years, it should look radically different than it looks currently. And, you know, even in the progress that they've made, it's not a radical difference. You look on their website and the statement from Susan Taylor is quoting MLK and Abraham Lincoln, you know, and for me, white people really enjoy utilizing MLK to position themselves in a place of peace and love. They don't want to talk about how he was murdered fighting for living wages. The day before he was murdered, he led a march fighting for living wages. And then he was assassinated, not because of his message of peace and love, but because he was pushing your system to radically change to a place. And so I think that for dismantle, for me, is a lot of people in a critique is like, well, we were already doing these things, right? We were pushing forward in inclusion. Yes. But we know that it was happening at a snail's pace. Being inside of that space, and a snail's pace is not good enough. So the article like you shared with us about that Toya Lillard from Hyperallergic. I saw that article because Quanice Ford, who also wrote about the Americans in the arts, confronting their white CEO with the same thing. This is happening over and over again, and yet we're still keeping these same leaders. We're still keeping the same structure, and we're saying, oh, now we're anti-racist. What does that mean? And so for me, dismantling is actually pushing the system to completely restructure. You can't maintain the same system and be like, oh, we're different now. Right. We've become a different institution. And I think like with Dismantle World War II, you all brought to light the structure that was there. I had only been there a couple of times myself. I had taken the teens from the program at NOMA over to World War II Museum. And so you all brought to the light of how much funds they have, the DEI, committee they have. I saw a World War II curator position, and the salary range was 45 to 55. So you want me to have a master's degree or a PhD so I can make $45,000 to $55,000 a year? And this is a current curator position out from the World War II Museum right now. So it's making me like aware of like, when I see these things, what do I think? What do other people think? These kind of conversations for me, like push me to action. And Fari, we actually had a different name. Our name was Decolonize NOMA. And Fari was like, yo, let's, we brainstormed and thought about different names, and Dismantle was perfect.
Yes.
Because it speaks to dismantling white supremacy from, the inside out. But they're pushing. They're like, oh, we've had DEI trainings and we've bought, some artwork from Black people from New Orleans, and that's it. No, it's not good enough.
Right, right. And to me, dismantle means take it apart, break it down, see what is worth saving and save that, and then toss out the rest.
Right.
And so, that requires removing people from positions of power that they are abusing and that they are, incapable of handling. They've shown themselves. They've shown themselves over a number of years to not be able to deal well with these issues. And so, all right, time for them to go. If we want any of these things to progress, then the museum has to be emptied out, literally and figuratively.
Yeah.
That means its staff, its board, its collections.
Yep.
We're also talking about, did some of you get these things in an ill-begotten manner?
Right.
Because if so, those things need to be returned to the rightful communities and cultural practitioners. So let's make that happen as well. And part of the reason why I wanted to talk about dismantling rather than decolonizing is because I'm still not 100% sure that I think decolonizing goes outside of the colonial mentality. It's like so purely reactive, And so it's like, not only that, but we have to acknowledge the fact that in the United States, this is an ongoing colonial project. The people who were the first people on this land are still being dispossessed, are still being, made more vulnerable to disease, as we see in the COVID-19, right? Whose sovereignty rights are being challenged, and not just in the legal case, but also in the physical realm of, violence being challenged as well. And so, I would hope that we can come together to talk about all of those issues, and we would hold our institutions to account from all of those subject positions,
Yeah. I guess right now I just don't have much faith in these institutions because I mean, how can we get the highest of the high people to actually listen to what the people want, the people that make them the money, And I just think about it from that. But the other thing is everybody else, like, yes, we have enough conscience to know that in order for them to listen, everybody else has to be on the same accord. Like the rest of us, the workers, the people that make up the bulk of just, overall production for these institutions, if we're all in the collective understanding that, if we all together, if we all say we need this or we're out, they'll do something. But the problem is that power dynamic, the threat of losing your job, the threat of, not being able to get another job because you left a job, like it's all kinds of stuff. So
right.
I appreciate y'all for giving all of that information. I feel more knowledgeable about this. I wanted to discuss quickly like some of our favorite like resources that we would like to share for people that are interested in hearing more about this. So I did kind of spiel off some names already, and I will link in the show description some links and Instagram pages for these specific pages. But as y'all know, Jen Fari do Dismantle NOMA. Me and a couple of my other comrades are over Dismantle National WWII Museum. There's Dismantle Sucre, which I haven't checked on them in a while, but I know that they have some stuff going on there. Pride of Lusher, which is a local high school here in the city. They changed the name. And then changed the museum. I like, well, that's not local, but like I really love their contribution to all of this, just because like people are just sending in all kinds of testimonials day after day after day after day. And I love it because like you could literally go into each testimonial and like I relate to pretty much all of them, I may not have ever worked at these specific places, and these are like museums from like all around the world too. And like to know that it's happening everywhere. So those are what I had, but I think Jen had a couple of others as well.
Yeah, like Change the Museum is really one of my favorites. I read it every day. Just thinking about how are we gonna, deal with our collective grief in this time, but then also the trauma that we've experienced in some of these institutions, and how do we take care of ourselves? We started the show talking about like mental health, what ways you think that you can, treat yourself better, treat your community better, and encourage people to do better. And I feel like Change the Museum is showing how museum workers are like letting us off our chests, giving the burdens to the people it belongs to, and moving on. I also love Dirt. Dirt is a collective in the DMV area, the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, that has created a list of institutional call outs. So they've tracked the numbers of letters, they've tracked what the museum's responses have been or lack of response. And I know that I want to share now that, NOMA is definitely on a PR campaign currently with the list of, this is what we've done so far. And we're going to keep the same leadership and the same structure and the same people, but this is what we've done so far. And so I love like an organization like Dirt and Art and Museum Transparency, because they're keeping up with, okay, this, it's been 6 months, it's been 8 months, it's been a year. I'd love to see what happens in 5 years and 10 years. Are we just looking at the same institutions, or was there a categorical shift? Was there a real transformational shift? Yeah.
Sweet. Thank you for that. Do you have anything, Fari?
Sorry.
Well, I was going to say the art museums and transparency. I love them. I think they're amazing. What's the organization? Is it WAGE? Is it WAGE?
Yeah, WAGE.
Like the acronym. We have been working with a burgeoning arts union that's coming together, arts and art workers, in New York, but that hopes to also be more national, which I am excited to continue to participate in. I think that the work you're doing with the People's Assembly is awesome. I think that ultimately the purpose is to come together and to join all of our struggles, because like you were saying, we have the numbers.
Yeah.
We have the numbers. We have the brain power. We have the spiritual and moral clarity.
Right.
The problem
and I don't think that's nothing.
Yeah.
I don't think that's nothing. I think that's something.
The main thing is, and I go back to this all the time, when the uprising for the Black Lives Matter movement happened last summer, we were all kind of not really doing anything because we were in quarantine. So we had the time to see what was actually happening, because we weren't bombarded with capitalism and having to work to obtain it, to maintain it. And now that we're kind of going back to our old ways, if you want to say it like that, we don't have nearly as much time to dedicate. So, we were conscious enough. We had enough time at that point to like at least understand, the system is fucked and we need to figure it out. We need to dismantle it. We got to change it. But when it comes back to like, old habits, like it's really easy to just to get back into a system of knowing it's there, but like not doing anything about it because you're too busy you don't have the capacity to do it because you're doing X, Y, and Z. And it may just not be because you don't want to, but the ways in which the system is designed, it's like you have to do this. You have to maintain capitalism or nothing. Like that's literally it. Like you have no other choice. So even when I do this work with the People's Assembly, like I know that is a long road. It's something that I have to even myself just make sure that I have the capacity to do every single week, because we're doing stuff every week. We have political education classes, we have our weekly meetings, and we're just talking and just like keeping informed and like updating things that are going on within the city that we're trying to help other workers just become more cognizant about like their dialectical lens as well. So in that regard, the only thing you can really do at that point is, anytime, any opportunity that you have with someone that you may not know or you don't know that well, and or like a worker. I mean, most of us are workers. Even if you're not actually, if you're unemployed, you're still a worker. You're still in the working class. It's very important to just keep their minds cognizant about the fact that until you are not, I should just say, until capitalism is no longer the main structure of the ways in which we work, we'll never be out of this fight. So how long do you want to stay in this same pattern when you see what's happening? Who's making the most money? Who's sleeping on the street? You know, like, just think about it. I just think about it from that regard, and that kind of keeps me motivated to want to change things, want to like, especially kids, like children. I really like to, like, when I get a chance to speak to them, I just try to hone that into them, you know, like, let them know, yo, we're trying to help you right now. We're trying to make sure that you don't have to deal with this once you get to our age. But in that regard, it's like, it's a long road.
I think that's the work, though. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're doing the work. Like, we think about like social media campaigns or letters. The work that you're doing in political education and talking with young people is what we need, right? That's the work. That's the hand-to-hand work that's going to undo these systems over time. Like, I feel like after DismantleNOMA dropped the letter, we also had a lot of students that reached out to us from various spaces. And you're talking about 19, 20, 21, the people who are going to form these institutions, the leaders of these institutions, and also the people who are, you know, leading Black-led, Black-centered spaces like the Black School, like the New Orleans African American Museum or Ashe Cultural Arts Center. We should support them more, right? And this has helped me shift my thinking. So when I'm like, oh, you know, I could be doing a monthly contribution to this organization or this organization, it's really helped to shift that. So there's some unseen ways that this whole thing has pushed us all to do more of this, you know. Absolutely.
And I just also would say, on like a more hopeful or optimistic note, that a lot of us are in survival mode, but I wouldn't count out the fact that things cannot go back to being the same. Things were already so untenable and so unsustainable. And so the good parts are the relationships and the connections that are strengthened and fortified, like this conversation happening. And people will continue to participate in systems that are destructive up until the point at which they can get their needs met. So it's through those other relationships that we are able to meet those needs. Such that we make these institutions that are harmful and damaging obsolete. You know, because they're always running after what we do. They're always running after what young people are doing, and they're always running after what Black women are doing. Come on. So we just keep doing it, and we just keep being the light and other light that they will see. We will see each other. And we'll come together, you know? I really do believe in that. I really do. And maybe that's naive, but Che Guevara said that the revolutionary must be compelled by love.
Oh, yes. I love it. That's such a great way to close us out. I also will say, I always just say is that Black women, we are already leaders, and we should really be in all of these leadership positions, but not under capitalist structures, I should say. But I wanted y'all to give your socials in case you want, in case anyone wants to follow you. If you're giving them out, you don't have to.
My Instagram page, which I love, is at Jendai, which is JENDAYI. It's my nickname that I've had for several years. And I love to post Black artists and funny memes and all kind of stuff like that, particularly. And I want to throw out Messy Museum Bitch. I want to shout Messy Museum Bitch out. That's not my page. No, thank you.
I know who it is. I know who they are.
They're phenomenal. Tell them I said.
We'll have to talk about that after the recording part.
They were a museum employee. They were one of the World War II museum employees.
Awesome.
I love it. I love it. It's so spot on. It's so spot on. Yeah, I'm on Twitter as at Fari, Fari _Nzinga, Nzinga. You can follow Color Block on Instagram. It's color _BLOC. And that's a group and a network that I co-founded that Jen is very much an integral member of. That's supposed to be just about sharing information and resources with artists and arts workers of color. It started out in New Orleans because that's where I lived. And now that I'm in Oberlin, I'm thinking about different ways that I can still be in service to artists and arts workers of color in other local contexts as well. And so it's just a place to exchange ideas, to learn. People post their events in the Facebook group and so forth. I'm still kind of getting the hang of Instagram, so maybe it's not quite as dynamic a page, but I'm working on it. So yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity.
You're so welcome. This was such a holistic conversation. I'm so happy we had this. Oh, goodness. You're welcome. Thank you. Well, let me just let my listeners know if you have any suggestions on future discussions that you would like me to cover on the Self-Aware Millennial. I'm always open to suggestions, so send them my way. Email the selfawaremillennial@gmail.com, or you can DM me on Instagram when I'm on there at the Self-Aware Millennial. And I mean, if you like me, check yes or no, or leave a review on Apple Podcasts. So do that.
5 stars.
5 stars. Yeah. Throw them stars in there. Yeah, please. Thank you. And also, as y'all know, have a Patreon. If you're all caught up, check it out. It's involved into a space for me not to just post my bonus episodes, birthday suit photos, and life updates, but it's becoming a space for me to share my multifaceted projects that I don't feel completely ready or confident in posting on my regular pages. And I'll be giving out free merch soon to a few of my top tier patrons. So that's www.patreon.com/theselfaware-millennial. Thank you again so much, Jen and Fari. Y'all were wonderful. And I want to just also one more time to everybody, wishing y'all a wonderful Black History, the rest of Black History Month that we have. I know we're pretty much done, but because I'm Black, it's Black History Month for me every month. So let's celebrate Blackness every single day, okay?
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to be leaving y'all with a small preview for my latest episode on Patreon with Ashley Gemini. I hope that y'all have a great day. Bye. See you later. Bye.